Hashem. Today's Daf Yomi is Avodah Zarah Daf Mem, Avodah Zarah 40. We're going to start on Lamentasim Bays, 6 lines from the bottom. Today's Daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, itself for the Shuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael on this 8th Torah. Gemara said that of Danios, these clusters of grapes, even though they're dripping juice out of the grapes, we're not going to assume that that's a liquid to make the food item capable of contracting tumah. Gemara says, is this really the case? Or a mini, if you press grapes into the vat, Shammai Omer Hochshar, Shammai says that liquid oozing out of them is capable of making the item. Those grapes are now Hochshar Kabal Tumah. And Hill Omer Hochshar, although Hill Shammai, and Hill admits to Shammai in the end. So the Gemara says, awesome kabayla mashke. So no, there in those cases you're gathering the grapes because eventually you're going to turn them into wine, and so therefore you want the liquid. Here you might be eating them. You don't want them for their liquid, and so therefore it's not hochshar l'kabel tumah. It's not capable of contracting tumah at that point. It doesn't. The liquid has to be something you want to be on it. Next line in the Mishnah says that you can eat a fish that you get from an idolater if it's a taurus, if it's a type of fish, sheina trufa, that's not chopped up. So the Gemara says, ezu taurus sheina trufa. What's an example of a taurus that's not chopped up? Kol sharosh v'shidra nikar. Anything where you could see the head and the spine of the fish, and you could tell that it's a kosher fish. Rashi says, shall kol dag v'dag, of every single fish. That the fish, we could tell the fish by their heads whether they're kosher or not kosher. That the non-kosher fish have pointy heads and they don't have a spine. The ezu tzir sheyesh ba daga, and says the Mishnah, it said in the Brisa continues, what's a fish brine that has a fish brine that has a fish swimming in it, then you could eat from that fish brine. What's that referring to? Kol kilbis achas shtei kilbos shows the toast. If you have one or two types of this kilbis, which is a non-kosher fish swimming in it, Rashi says, dagam tahorim. This is a type of fish that, through what they believe, there was something called spontaneous generation. Not just them. Most of human history, people believe that there were fish that could just grow on their own. Just through what we call spontaneous generation, which today's science does not believe in. So if there was some non-kosher fish brine, the kilbus would not grow in it. Top of Nema but Aleph. Hashta kilbus achas amri shari shtei kilbus mibaye. So Gemara says, well, why do you need two? If you say one kilbus is sufficient, why does the Brisa have to say if there are two kilbus growing there? It would also be kosher. If one is sufficient, also two. So we're going to say, well, kasha, kama psuchos, kama stuma. So one is with an open barrel, you need two because we're concerned it didn't start to grow there. But if it's a closed barrel, then we say it's sufficient with just one fish. Rav Huna says that you need, in order to make it, in order to, Rav Huna says that the taurus that was not chopped up is only going to be kosher when you have the head and the spine of the fish recognized. Well, you need both. Rav Nachman says, O rosh, O shidra. You need either the head or the spine. So, Boker Tov Habs, good morning. So, Mosiv Rav Ukva, so Rav Ukva Bar Chama asked the question, Uvidagim kol sheyesh los napir v'kaskeses. Rav Ukva Bar Chama says, but what about the fact that the Brisa says that by fish you don't need the head or the spine? This is a Mishneh L'Trefos, but you need the fins and the scales. So we see from here, it has nothing to do with the head or the spine. It has to do with the fins and the scales. So Amar Baye Kitanya, when do we say that fins and scales are what are the necessary signs of a kosher fish? That's only by two types of fish, called the Ara and the Pamuda. The Damu Reishayu Itmayim, because those fish, their heads look like the non-kosher fish. Remember we said on Lamentasim Beis, Rashi said non-kosher fish have pointy heads. So those fish have pointy heads, therefore we need to have fins and scales on them. This dispute, so this machokes, that do you need two signs of the chut and the shidra, or it's okay with one of them, where Rav Huna says you need both signs, or now says you need one. That dispute is l'tavo b'tzirin. That's only to put it in the brine of a begufan divrei kol aser, but to put it in the eat the fish itself, ache rosh v'shidra nikar. Then you would need both of them, according to Rav Nachman. Why would the brine need less? So Tosfos asks this question, but don't we say the brine is also biblically prohibited? So why would you say brine you only need one siman? So Tosfos says the valid diaraisa tziron aser. He says, yeah, for sure the fish brine is prohibited biblically. Nevertheless, the tziron is nullified in majority, whereas the gufan, the body of the fish, will not be nullified. So therefore, because it's a birya, a creature, it's not nullified. So therefore, everybody says you need two. That's the assumption. Amar Rav Zera Mireish Hava Mitpalina B'tzirin. At first, so it says Rav Zera, at first I would dip it in the brine. Given the Shemana Lahadam Rav Yehuda Mishmei De'ua, that once I heard this teaching, this Chiddush of Ua, the Machokas of Latava B'tzirin, the spirit is only to dip in the brine of a Begufan Divrei Kol Aser Achei Rosh Shedra Nikar. But by the body you need both. But Tzirin Nami Lo Mitpalina. But so then by the fish brine, I also didn't dip it until you had both Simanim, like Rav Huna. So Rav Papa says the law is that you need to have the head and the spine recognizable for each and every fish in the pot. So says but we have a brayta. How could Rav Papa say you need every fish to have the simanim on it? But then we have the brayta that says you just need the simanim on even on one of them, and it's okay. There was once a story about an idolater that he brought a jug of fish. And there was just a sign on one of them. And Rashbag allowed the entire one. And so anyway, we see from the brayta that you don't need to check all the fish, like Rav Papa said, but you only need to check one of them. So Terger Rav Papa So Rav Papa said that brayta refers to when all the pieces look exactly the same. So therefore, you only need a siman on one of them. And Gemara says, well, what's the chiddush? And Gemara says, no, he might have said that maybe he was using deception. He was tricking you, and he was making them all look the same in order to deceive you. Kamash don't have to worry about that. So we have this ship which was filled with these small fish, which are called the tzachanta fish. This is the same fish, Rashi says, as the chilek fish. The Asi was Sichra, came to the port that's called the Sichra port. Nafak Rav Huna bar China v'chaza be'kilfei. The Rav Huna bar China saw that there were some scales next to it, and so he allowed it. Mispishari. So Amar V'yamim Mediftu L'didi Amar Rav Papi. He says, I don't understand. Wait, I skipped a line. He says, can you really just allow it just because there are other scales there? Maybe the fish come from the other scales. Rashi says, maybe there's kosher fish and non-kosher fish. And the scales come from the kosher fish. They didn't necessarily come from all the fish that were there. So the Gemara says, so Rav Yirmiyah Difti has a problem with it. So Rava says, Mika Sharki Agam Abbas, right? So Nafik Shipur de Rav of Aser. So the teaching of Rav Wanani prohibited. Shipur de Rav Huna Barchina Vashari. The teaching of Rav Huna Barchina permitted. Amareva Yirmiyah Medifta. Lididi Amarli Rav Papi. Kishar Rav Huna Barchina Batsiran. So he said, Rav Papi said to me that when Rav Huna Barchina allowed it, that was only the fish brine, which we said either was batal. We said it was batal, so therefore he allowed it. Aval the gufan, but the fish itself, the chaticha of the fish, the piece of the fish, lo, he didn't allow it. Amar Vashli, di Amali Rav Papa, Kichar Rafun Barchina, feel the gufan. When Rav Papa allowed it, he allowed even on the body. V'anu Meser Asrina. And we are not going to. V'anu Meser Asrina. We're not going to. And we're not. So Rav Ashi says. I'm not going to prohibit eating the fish itself. The Ka'amrli Rav Papa, because Rav Papa said to me, Sharina, because I'm not going to prohibit it because Rav Papa said to me, but I'm also not going to allow it to Amar Rav Yehuda Mishmei Du'ah, because we have the Chiddush of Uah that says you need both simonim, and therefore it's not okay. So therefore, Machokas, because Rav Huna Rav Nachman said it's okay, and that machokus was only to dip it in the brine of the gufan by the body itself. The we need the head and the spine of each one. You're recognizable. So Yasser Rav China bar Ide Kameid Rav Ada bar Ava Yasser Ka'amar. So Rav China bar Ide was sitting in front of Rav Ada bar Ava, and he said, Obik Chom Shehevi Areva. Let's say there's an idolater that brought a ship, Melea Chavios, it's filled with barrels, Benimtza Kilbas Ba'achas Mehem, and they found this Kilbas floating in one of them. What's a Kilbas, Hobbs? A Kilbas is like a little small fish, but they used to believe that fish was spontaneously generated. Do you know what spontaneous generation is? So they used to believe in that, and therefore they said that's an indication that it's kosher because it only grew up. The kilbas only spawned in the non-kosher in the barrels containing the kosher fish. So anyway, the ship came in and they found a barrel. One of the barrels had the kilbas. So if the barrels were open, kulam mutaros, all the barrels are going to be permitted. Because we have to assume that the kilbas was in them and it left. But if they're situmos, but if the barrels are all closed, then the barrel that has the kilbas in it, himuteris, that's permitted. The kuon asuris, and everything else is prohibited. So Ravad bar Ava says to Rav China bar Idi, Amrulay Menocha, how do you know this? It says, I heard it from 3 verses. It doesn't mean 3 verses, it means from 3 chachamim. From Rav, Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan. Amarav Bruna, Amarav, Kirve Dagim Vubarim. Let's say you have the intestines of the fish and their eggs. Ein kachan element on mumcha. You can only purchase it from a mumcha. What's a mumcha here? So there's a dispute here. Does a mumcha refer to somebody who is an expert in halacha or an expert fishmonger? Anyway, we see from here, Mikal, the dog tame isla uber. We see from here that a non-kosher fish has these these baby eggs inside of it. But it produces baby eggs. Is that really the case? There are many dog tame mashrits, dog tar metal baitzim. But didn't we have a brisa that says a non-kosher fish does not produce eggs? It just produces little fish, and the kosher fish produces eggs. So the Gemara says. The Gemara says, "Samei mikan." Okay, ubran, take that word, little eggs, out of the text. Amalei Rav Zera, lo tismei. No, don't remove it. Travail matili beitzim nino. Even the non-kosher fish also produces eggs. Ela zeh mashrit mi b'chutz v'zeh mashrit mi b'fnim. The kosher fish produces the eggs externally. He lays the eggs, whereas the non-kosher fish has the eggs internally. So if that's the case. So the Gemara says, why do we need an expert to tell us whether or not the fish eggs are kosher? Why don't we just check the signs of the egg to see if it's kosher? The Tanya kisimani beitzim, kalsimani dagim. Just like there are signs on the eggs of a bird, of a kosher bird, so too there are signs on a fish. Simani, so on the eggs of a fish, and the Gemara says, but so too there are signs on a fish. Simanim dug himself to death. You mean to say there are signs on a fish? We already know what those signs are. Simani dug him, snapping because kesses ksibiru. They're fins and scales. Ella kisimani beitim kach simani ubrei dug. Just like there are signs on the eggs of a kosher bird, kach simani ubrei dug. So too there are signs on the eggs of the fish, of the kosher fish. Ela and simani beitim. These are the signs of an egg. Kosher koderes, anything that is elongated, that it's wide on one side, and then it gets shorter. Boker Tov, Jeff, good morning. And also the agul geles, and it also it rolls, Rashi says. It's not flat. And also Rosha Echad Kad, Rosha Echad Kad. One side is wide, and the other side is very sharp. This is the sign of a kosher egg. Tahora, Beis Rosha Chadim, but if both sides are pointy, Beis Rosha Chadim, or both sides are wide, then Tamea, then it's non-kosher. Chalmon mi bachutz, if the yolk is on the outer part, the chalmon mi b'fnim, and the white is on the inner part, that's a tamea, that's a non-kosher bird. Chalmon mi bachutz, but if the white is external, the chalmon mi b'fnim, and the yolk is internal, tar, it's a kosher bird. Chalmon v'chalmon mu'ravin is if the white and the yolk are mixed together, zui beitas hasheret, that's a sign that it is the egg of a sheret, so this creepy crawly creature, like a toad or a lizard. Rashi says they give forth that they produce eggs. Rashi says the tzav is the choko real, which sounds a little bit like a crocodile to me, but it's not. He says, but he says, Hadomel Tzfardeh, it's similar to a frog, so it's like a toad. Amarava, so why do we need an expert then? So Rava says, Kishini Mucho. Think about a case where the eggs melted. Well, Rebbe, so they're not recognizable. Rebbe Dustai, Demimbiri, the Amar, Samamikan Ubaran. If he says, remove the eggs from this text, Ratanya, how can we remove the eggs from the text? But don't we say, Kisimani Beitzim, or on top of Memam Abayz, don't we say Kisimani Beitzim, Kach Simani Ubre Dagim? Don't we say in the Brisa that just like you have the signs of the eggs, so too you have the signs of the fish eggs, meaning to say there are specific signs for the kosher fish eggs. And so we see that also a non-kosher fish has eggs. So the Gemara says, didn't we already amend the text? So we know the text needs to be amended. So kach simane kirve dagim. So we say no, that these are the signs of the fish intestine. Mishkachas b'simane kirve dagim. Sheakad v'chad. And what are the signs of the intestines of the fish? Where do we see that this fish this kosher fish has these signs that it's both wide and then narrow? So mishkachatz la b'shalfucha, that's by the bladder, the air bladder of the fish. So let's say there's no expert to tell you whether or not these eggs are kosher. He says if the guy who's salting them says, I salted them and I saw that they're kosher and I brought out these intestines from them, it's permitted. Rav Nachman Amar Achi Amar Elu Dagim Ve'elu Kirbein. We have to say these are the fish and these are the intestines. And Orele Rav Yehuda La'ada, so Ada must have been a fishmonger. So Rav Yehuda said to him, Daiwa, he said to him, Daiwa. that was the name, Adi the Shamish, that he always went to go and prepare his meal for him. So he said to him the following. He says, Kivin Damar Animo Achtim Mutarm. If the fishmonger says, I'm the one who salted them, then you can rely on him. It said in our Mishnah that if the idolater gives you a leaf of a chiltas, is the type of a sharp vegetable, you can eat it. Pshita, it's obvious. It's obviously the case. So no, it means that you could also eat the little berries that came with it. You might have thought that maybe that he took some seeds that got mixed up in it, and from the seeds that were cut with the greasy knife, which was not kosher. And we say no. So we say no, that these seeds were probably found that they have been came off the leaf, and that's why they're next to the leaf. And if you have some pressed olives, then you can eat them. Pshita, it's obvious you can eat them. No, nitzracha avagav the rafi tuva, that even though they're very soft, mal de temer chamra ramabu. He might have said he added wine. Kamash muan. We say no. We don't say that. Hani machmas mishcha the rafi. We say no, that they weren't. They're not soft because of the wine, but because of the oil. Rav Yosef Amar Shlochen Asur, that if the idolater gives you the shlochen, it's prohibited. What are these cases of the shlochen? What is the shlochen? Amar Rav Yosef Rachanina Kol Sha'ochso Biyado V'Garinaso Nishmetis. Anything you're holding, and then the seed pops out, because we have to be concerned that maybe the wine was added to it. If you have the locusts that come from the baskets in front of the shop, then it's going to be a problem and you can't eat it. So the Gemara says, if you have the locusts and the caperberries and the kafutos, which are, we say, are the leeks, they come from the storage in the back. These are the storage places, they're permitted. But if they're being sold in the marketplace in front of the shopkeeper, then we're going to say that it's a problem. And what's the reason? Because he wants them to look good and he wants them to smell good, so he's going to sprinkle his wine upon them. What's a yayin tapuchim? So tapuach was probably not an apple here. Probably means like a fruity wine, a wine that comes from a schnapps, but not grapes. So the yayin tapuchim shall the klavim. Habam and if it comes from the storage, when after mutarin. So if it just comes from basically the back, then it's permitted. But hanimkar b'katuza, but if it's sold in the marketplace, also then it'll be prohibited because there's a concern that they typically would add wine to it over there. One time, Rabbi got a stomach ailment. He says, does anybody know if this, what we call this yayin tapuchim of the idolater, is prohibited or permitted? I'm in front of Rabbi Shmuel by Rabbi Yossi. One time, father got sick. So ayin shana. They brought him this yayin tapuchim that had been 70 years old. This shata v'nisrap, and he drank it and he was healed. He said, you had this teaching for such a great teaching, and you knew about it, and you're still allowing me to be in pain. They found one idolater who had 300 barrels of wine that was 70 years old. And he drank it and he was healed. So Rebbe said, Baruch HaMakom, blessed be God, handed over his world to the showman to care for him. So basically, Rebbe was in need of a healing. And so as we come to the end of the tractate, which talks about all the things that we're not allowed to eat from the idolaters, we're reminded that we sometimes do need to eat from the idolaters, that Rebbe himself needed to be healed. And the idolater watched it for 70 years. You know that 70 the year is for the redemption of the temple. And also 70 is the year of the life of a man. But anyways, so Rebbe praised, Baruch HaMakom, blessed be God, Shemasar Olam Shomrim, gave everybody as a purpose in the world. And in this case, who are the Shomrim? This idolater is the Shomer of the medicine for Rebbe. V'chein Truma had also said in the Mishnah that so too for Truma. What does that mean? What does that mean? This halacha that we had said, read the exact line in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said on the bottom of Tesam Beis, it said, Rabbi Yossi says, the shlachim are asurim, the locusts that come from the sul are asurim, and a heptic mitarin v'chein l'truma. What does that mean, v'chein l'truma? My v'chein l'truma. Amar Avsheshis v'kein l'kohen ha'choshet l'mkor truma l'shem chulin. So too, if there's a kohen who's suspected of selling truma for chulin, then we say the same halacha. I mean, say you're not allowed to buy your chulin. If it's truma, you can't eat the truma. Only the kohen can. So if the kohen is suspected of selling the truma for chulin, then we're going to say lefanav hudas, or if it's right in front of him, it's prohibited. But from the back, mutar, because we're going to say that maybe if it's right in front of him, he mixed in his truma with it. But the stuff that comes from the back, then we're going to say that it's permitted because the irasuse mirsas, because he's afraid to sell the stuff to mix the chulin and the truma in the back because he's afraid. He said the rabbis will hear about what I'm doing and they'll take it away from me. And so since in the front it's a much smaller amount, he's not worried about the loss, but he's not going to risk his whole inventory. So Hadrin, this is this beautiful chapter called Emamidin. We'll return to you, and God willing, next time we'll start the third chapter, which is called Slamin. Yashikoach.